All right. So for the first sort of deep dive guide, skill mechanic guide, we're gonna do trigger skills. I released a overview guide of all the kind of the different classes of skills, skill mechanics. I've been asked quite a lot, what's the difference between things like trigger skills, passives, auras, graces, blessings. And as such, I've done a short overview video, maybe you've watched that, where we're just quickly explaining what is each kind of skill, and what should you learn more. So for this one, it's going to be all about trigger skills. There will be other standalone guides for the other classes, but for this one, we're going to focus on exclusively trigger skills. First up, just a quick recap in case you haven't watched the general overview video. Infinity Kingdom does mark some passives, some Tower of Knowledge passives as passive, rather than triggered, despite the fact that they are in fact both trigger skills. Like for instance, combo, you should disregard the in-game text, it will only confuse you. You should think of all skills that has a trigger as a trigger skill. Like looking at combo, it reads that once it's triggered, your immortal has a certain percent chance to inflict physical damage on your enemy, and it's also indicated that the trigger condition is normal attacks. As such, when your immortal has combo on, there's a certain percent chance to trigger X physical damage every time your immortal performs a normal attack. That is clearly a trigger condition, and a trigger effect. So a trigger skill. On other skills like Chaotic Blade, the magic dots like Nova and Toxic Nova and Fire Nova, also the physical Garrote, equivalent of Chaotic Blade. We've got a timer as a trigger instead. This is important to note because we're no longer saying with combo we had like a normal attack as the trigger condition. For this one, we've got a time trigger, so every 6 seconds, and that should be noted, especially later when we're getting into the synergies. Lastly, from the overview video, we learned that there's a few different trigger skills, but that the fundamentals are all the same. A trigger skill always has a trigger condition and a trigger effect. Skill effect. They do, however, differ greatly in terms of what is the trigger condition and what is the skill effect. Whereas skills like cleave and combo being triggered from normal attacks, they cause a single damage. They also cause a single damage instance. Once triggered, the effect is a single a big burst of damage, one damage instance. Other trigger skills like chase, for instance, has a different trigger condition. It triggers off of critical hits, but it has the same skill effect, a single instance of damage, in this case AoE damage. This means that any instance of damage performed by this immortal, having a crit trigger, has a chance to actually trigger the skill. It's not only normal attacks, instead ultimate abilities, normal attacks, and most importantly, other passive skills, other Tower of Knowledge skills, can trigger the effect once they land as a critical hit, only when they roll a crit. So chase, you can really begin to see some synergies, right? Another trigger condition, just to finish that off, we've had normal attacks, we've had a time trigger, and we've got a crit trigger, and now we have a time trigger. Skills like Annihilation, Garrote, etc. has a time trigger condition, meaning that every certain seconds, usually 6 seconds, the passive skill rolls and activates. Maybe it activates. It has a chance to activate, but the skill trigger is simple time, so you can't synergize that the same way as you can combo and cleave. With Annihilation, every 6 seconds the die is rolled and you have a 45% chance to cause the skill effect of up to 300% magic damage to all 4 enemy mortals. The same trigger condition applies for skills like Garrote, Chaotic Blade, Toxic Nova, Fire Nova. However, the trigger condition is the same. While it's after X seconds X happens, then the skill effects are quite different. They're quite different from each other, and they're quite different from what we saw from Cleave Combo and Annihilation. Instead of dealing a dealing a single instance of damage, when the trigger condition is true, skills like Garrote, Chaotic Blade, Toxic Nova, and Fire Nova deals single damage in AoE, but also a damage over time effect, which once applied triggers for additional damage instances. Here is where it gets interesting, because this means you could do synergies for these trigger skills. It's quite important that you think about especially what is the actual trigger condition and skill effect for each and every single Tower Knowledge skill before deciding to use it in the skill setup. For instance, if you're running, let's say we're running this Earth March, right? So Pure Earth is pretty straightforward. Got Alex, Charles, Zenobia, Cleo. Well, you have 4 very different immortals, and you have to play to each other's strengths. Like a skill like Combo Cleave, we know that the trigger condition is normal attacks. This means that using it on an immortal like Alexander with high attack speed actually increases the efficiency of these passives, because the trigger is normal attacks. So if you can increase the amount of normal attacks, attacks per second, then these are going to trigger more and deal more damage. Equipping them on slow attacking immortals are going to have significantly lower effect. As such, Alex is the best immortal in all of Infinity Kingdom for these 2 skills, simply because he has the best attack speed in the game. Moreover, you're going to think about what is the skill effect. In this case, we're dealing physical damage once the trigger is met. That means you want to equip it on a physical damage immortal, an immortal which has a high physical attack stat in the attribute page. Again, Alex, perfect. Synergies. When thinking about these synergies, you can do sort of a thought experience. What would happen if you equip these on Zenobia? What's gonna happen is that she attacks extremely slowly, so you're gonna barely get any procs. Her physical attack attribute is quite low as well, so you're pretty much getting no triggers, getting no procs, and you're getting low skill effect once trigger is met. Same kind of concept applies, right? So let's look at what you could, for instance, equip on your Cleo. We've got triggers such as Chase. We learned that Chase has a crit trigger condition, meaning that for greater effect, you're gonna want to synergize it with other passives which has a lot of damage instances. Go back to Combo, you have a trigger which triggers 1 additional damage instance. A skill like Annihilation, well, Annihilation hits all your enemy units, meaning you have actually got, for 1 trigger, you got 4 instances of damage. Stuff like Death Breath, you have a trigger on time, but it's also not got a percentage, so it will for sure hit multiple times every 6 seconds, because that indeed is an AoE skill that causes both physical damage and magical damage every time the 6-second timer is met. That means a high amount of damage instances. You can also use dots for these kinds of things, and that means that the total number of hits and damage instances you have is going to be high, meaning the chance for landing a critical hit is going to be greater, and your chase is going to hit a lot more times. That way you can synergize, skill like Chase that requires critical hits, well, you want to boost your crit, but you also want to, we're going to move on to that, but you're also going to want to have as many damage instances as you possibly can. In addition, you do want to boost your crit. That means equipping weakness and possibly adding more immortals into the mix. If you, for instance, run a fire team, you can add William and Trajan, which both provide crit buffs to greatly increase the effectiveness of your chase, because suddenly you have a greater chance to land a critical hit, you have a greater chance to meet the trigger condition and get more skill effects. So there's also another level to sort of synergizing trigger skills and Tower Knowledge passives. Those are the elemental dragon bonuses. Always want to check out the third skill on your dragon, because that has a unique effect and skill mechanic that synergizes with immortals and skills. For lightning, for instance, you've got all lightning immortals get a 3% damage buff, stacking up to 4 times for each debuff cast on your enemy mortals. That means that skills like the damage over time effects, energy suppression, stuff like that, has a greater effect because it synergizes with this. While let's just say Chaotic Blade deals a certain amount of damage and has a certain amount of value, doing it in Lightning's March versus an Earth March, the value of the skill is greater for the Lightning setup, because you're gonna be boosting the damage of your Lightning immortals every time it lands. Likewise, we've got let's take a quick sneak peek on fire. You've got the Blessings and Graces here, which are providing a buff to your immortals, adding an additional buff from the Fire Dragon. I'm not going to go into depth on this one. Got to stay tuned for the Blessing and Graces, the standalone guide instead. But it's just important to be aware that these elemental bonuses are another layer of mechanics that interact and synergizes with your immortals and skills. I hope that some of these examples that I've been giving about synergies and how to think about trigger skills, trigger conditions, how to make sure you get as many chances to land your triggers and to get better skill effects, as well as how to synergize skill effect with the right immortals, makes sense to you. I really don't like doing tier skills. I know that a lot of people are asking for them. I'm being hammered for them. I don't like doing that for the simple reason that a skill can never be valued at a static amount. Like say you're running Death Breath, right? It's a great skill. It's really strong. It would probably rank top, but it's gonna be crap if you equip it on Zenobia or Charles. It's gonna be amazing if you equip it on Wu, and it's gonna be even better if you synergize it with Chase and Annihilation or Concentration or something like that. And that's why I really don't like doing tier lists. Instead, I think you should try and think about the effectiveness of each and every single immortal and every single Tower Knowledge skill and passive that you equip, because it is 100% dependent on the synergy with the rest of the setup, and as well as what is best to use depends on what you're fighting. Like take a classic example of Oaken Guard is often heralded as, and by me as well, as one of the absolute best passives of the game. Well, yeah, it is if you're up against a physical immortal team, but let's say you're up against a fire team with like a dual mage fire. Oaken Guard is providing little to absolutely no value. You would want resist over that, even though it's not part of the meta build. Again, it just means that you need to think about every decision that you make in Infinity Kingdom. It's what makes it complex, and what it makes it frustrating for some players, but it's also what makes this great this game great, and is the reason why I personally spent so damn many hours on this game. I love the game because the ability to theory craft, synergize things, and build new setups and compositions is quite unique and extremely well made. Anyway, that's it for the trigger skills. I hope to get another guide out on blessings and graces for this week, and I think the last two on passives and auras is gonna have to wait for next week after Christmas. But Merry Christmas, everybody, and thank you for watching. As always, please do subscribe to the channel. I consistently release new content here on the IK channel and on the official IK Wiki website. Links are in the description. On these channels you can find guides from everything in IK, from events to talents, passives, finished builds and game mechanics. With that, I'm gonna leave you, and as always, thank you for watching and see you for the next one.